This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 498, entitled Masculist Arguments Are Stronger Than Feminist Arguments. Description. This flyer shows how masculist arguments are stronger than feminist arguments due to a much greater moral force that masculists impose on women to stop being decades-lasting manslavers, putting enormous moral pressure on women to fit up and pull their financial weight by getting career-competent educations at high school and college. Masculist scientists use their knowledge of science, their scienacy, to ridicule so much of feminist doctrine that does not stand up to scientific scrutiny. For example, the feminist push to remove the patriarchy, overlooking the fact that women largely caused it, and that the patriarchy is a natural side effect of women's hypergamy. When millions of masculists feel their arguments are much stronger than feminist arguments, they'll be in a much stronger position to crush the MFB, isscienate fairies in millions of monoconscious, feminist, biconscious, masculist, verbally violent arguments that are soon coming. Flyer itself. Masculist arguments are stronger than feminist arguments, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. The time is soon coming when biconscious masculists will be verbally attacking monoconscious feminists. So it's very much in the self-interest of the masculists to feel that they are well equipped with strong masculist arguments that they can use to crush the MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, who dogmatically cling to their monoconscious feminist idea that gender oppression is a one-way street. This flyer points out to masculists how masculist ideas are stronger than feminist ideas in the sense that they are both more thoroughly grounded in science, that is backed up with scientifically verified claims, and perhaps more importantly, the masculists claim that they have the moral high ground, that masculist arguments are very powerfully motivated on moral grounds, having a greater degree of moral force than feminist moral arguments against men. I'll start with the superior masculist moral high ground, namely that women have to stop being manslavers and fit up. One of the strongest arguments of the masculists that any moderately informed masculist can hurl at an MFB is that women have a powerful moral obligation to get off their fat parasitic asses and fit up. The argument goes as follows, and is one that any masculist should be very familiar with, since it is a core idea of masculist doctrine. It was men who liberated women from household drudgery by giving women science-based medicine, and hence a life expectancy of 85 years. Men gave women the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, higher education, etc. So even those women who stay at home for a few years to raise their very small children still have a career window of half a century, so that masculists are now in a position to stand up, to point the finger at women and tell them, quote, "Now that you women can work, you must work. Anything else is manslavery, and manslavery in time will get you killed. You women have a powerful moral duty to FIP up, to bother to get a career-competent education, so that you can be financially responsible FIP as an adult, and not expect fluffy style to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, which will only make you hated by the masculists, who in time will be most men, who will punish you severely by totally ignoring you, not even pumping and dumping you. As a fluffy, you'll be seen as a manslaver, and that will make you hated and ignored by men, forced to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at, by an ever-increasingly masculisted society, as masculist ideas spread across the planet as feminist ideas did half a century ago." End quote. Masculists tell women that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, since women's oppression of men is often continuous and lasts decades. The worst example being women's decades-lasting man-slaving parasitism of the labour and money of a man, by not bothering to fib up, to become a morally, financially responsible adult, and instead expects to manslave a man, having him work for her for decades and giving him a bit of sex from time to time. Masculists utterly reject this old gender role of the male and put powerful moral pressure on women to fib up or rot on the shelf, spat at for being manslaving vermin, to be wiped out. To masculists, fluffydom is manslavery, and manslavery to masculists is slavery, and hence hated, and hence a war issue. The masculists are at war against the fluffies and fluffy feminists who oppress men so badly. Masculists point out how so many of the gender crimes that women commit against men are continuous and last decades. For example, paternity fraud, where in about 5% of pregnancies the husband is not the father. So the mother manslaves him for decades, a major gender crime by her against her husband, and utterly callous. But that is how women evolved, to be able to do this kind of thing. That is, be able to quickly, coldly, disloyally dump a man who is no longer able to provide her and her babies with male-hunted meat. So she quickly dumps him and gives her vagina to another more sexploitable man. If she didn't and remained loyal to her, quotes, or in brackets, in her eyes, useless man, then she could starve and her babies. But we live now in the 21st century, in which women have the pill and a career window of half a century. So men are in a position to apply powerful moral pressure on women to fib up or be forced to be manless and harangued out of the room by angry, hateful masculists who do not tolerate fluffy, manslaving parasitism. In a few years, the moral pressure on fluffies to fib up will be crushing. Women will have no choice but to conform or be pushed out of society, cast out, pariahed, shunned, effectively exterminated. There are other major gender crimes that women commit against men that last decades. For example, pill lying, in which a woman tells her man that she's on the pill, but isn't, who really wants to get pregnant as her biological clock is ticking hard. So she gets pregnant, then by law forces him to pay for decades for a kid he didn't want in the first place, which manslaves him for decades, a major gender crime against him by her. To combat this pill lying, the masculists want the same right to reject an unwanted pregnancy as women have. Women have the MARA, maternity rejection right, but men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection right. So men are routinely manslaved for decades of their lives by callous, pill-lying women who see men as cash machines put on this earth to pay for women to have babies. One of the core political programs of the Masculists is to have the para legislated and to force women to FIP up. Masculists push for the creation of a FIP society in which both sexes are raised and educated to be FIPs. In the past, when there was only feminism pushing women to become FIPs, fluffies had the luxury to ignore the advice of the feminists that it was a good thing to become financially independent of a man and earn her own decent salary by having a career-competent education that allows her to earn that good salary. But a fluffy cannot ignore a similar moral pressure coming from the masculists to FIP up, since a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible, manslavable man. But thanks to the MGTOW and masculist movements, The supply of such men is drying up. More and more fluffies are now feeling the social and moral pressure coming from MGTOW and masculisted men that women have to be fips or be spat at for being manslaving, parasitic vermin. Masculists want the establishment of gender equality committees in the parliaments to overcome the current hypocrisy that the issues of women's gender equality is treated, but men's gender equality is totally ignored, largely because masculist ideas are not yet widely known enough, which is why people like me write masculist flyers, helping to get the masculist word out to the planet, so that billions of people can see that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men far worse, implying that there is a stronger case for masculism than feminism. These gender equality committees will consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, who will address the gender issues of both sexes equally, which is far from being the case today. The above presented the greater moral strength of masculism compared to feminism. Even rape is small beer compared to women's decades-lasting manslaving of men. Now I turn to the greater intellectual, scientific strength of masculist ideas compared to feminist ideas. If one looks at the main arguments of the feminists, the modern third wave feminists, who are out to give women equal power with men, especially in the boardrooms of companies and in the parliaments, by having female quotas, that is, half of politicians should be women, which is now the case in New Zealand, 48%, which was the first country in the world to give women the vote in 1893. This is the end of part 1.